Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So for the majority of this year, we've been getting news about Heart of Thorns, and we've been getting statements from the devs saying, hey, when Heart of Thorns releases, we are doing this, our aim is to accomplish this. And this thing is awesome, it's going to make the game so amazing in so many different ways, right? And there's been largely a lot of marketing, a lot of hype stuff, a lot of stuff that I have wanted to buy into myself, because obviously don't we all hope that the game's going to be good in the end. Well, today I kind of wanted to look back, basically, at a few topics, a few things about the game, non-story stuff. This will be one of the last videos I do that is super spoiler clean. Non-story stuff, but things that were changing with Heart of Thorns, with Guild Wars 2, that were supposed to have a positive impact on the game, and just seeing how really those have affected the way we play, our general enjoyment levels. So, for an example, earlier in the year, they talked about how they were going to change condition damage to be capless, and they were going to change some of the formulas that were being used, so we'd see more condition damage stuff. And in general, yes, condition damage builds are far more rewarding to play now. There's still some weird balance with how burning feels compared to stuff like bleeds, but in general, they managed to succeed at their aims. An expansion's a big thing and comes with a lot of stuff, so I want to highlight just a few different areas of the game, talk to you guys about how I've experienced those changes, and where in a lot of cases actually things haven't been as positive as, you know, some of us may have originally hoped. So in no particular order, which means we'll probably get a load of good ones and then a load of really negative ones and end all feeling crappy. Here we go. First thing to talk about is mastery points. Now, I did a little bit of a discussion on this yesterday, and I was talking specifically about how during the betas, I was worried that mastery points wouldn't be a valid currency. Those totally did end up being a currency, but what about other things? Of course, there's been a lot of discussion on the general grindiness of the mastery system, and we've all got our own opinion on that based on the amount of boosters that we've had, based on whether we've been playing solo or with other people, based on how much we've been doing events versus how much we've been tagging random mobs, and also based just on our tolerance and our threshold for what we consider grind to be. So let's ignore that part of the discussion. Look at some other things. Has this been positive for the game? In general, I think this is actually a place that they really nailed, something that they really managed to succeed at doing, and specifically in a few areas I can point to and say, yeah, I'm enjoying Guild Wars 2 a lot more now because of masteries. Number one is, yes, these early day experiences we have with that kind of Metroidvania feel for the jungle. You find something, you go off, you come back later and you can overcome the challenge. The way that this as an MMO interacts with that feel, and you get some people that can do things while other people cannot, and you get these cool experiences I talked about yesterday. But there's some other stuff too. The mastery system obviously isn't just mastery points. It could have funked that Metroidvania stuff I just talked about, even how, I suppose, to an extent, the grindy discussion could all have applied if the mastery system literally just was mastery points and there was no idea of leveling up, right? And then maybe you had to grind for the points or something. But specifically, they tied masteries to experience. And why did ArenaNet do this? Because they appreciated that a whole ton of their game was rewarding experience. Dynamic events rewarded experience. Dungeons rewarded experience. And experience was building, you know, this time last year, building into a dead currency, skill points that nobody really cared about, and a lot of systems there in the game, a lot of incentive for people to spread out and kill mobs that have been rarely killed or do events that they might not have seen for a long time, was just hamstrung, was gone because experience generally was not a mechanic. Masteries have definitely brought that back. So while I'm playing now, I'm focused on killing mobs that I think other players probably haven't been around and killed that for a while, and then I'm rewarded when I manage to do it because I get this huge chunk of bonus experience. I remember on one of the streams, Colin said, oh, you're going to care about gathering stuff around the jungle, you know, getting random wood, which shouldn't be worth anything. You're going to care about that because you get experience. Has that translated? Yeah, it has. You know, I'm harvesting like friggin' not just wood, which now has more value in the economy, which we'll talk about soon, but stuff like mussels. I've been going for any random old nonsense out in the jungle. I tend to find myself incentivized to go for and to press F and pick up. So this is great. A lot of consumables, you know, which now cost a lot of money, were valueless and meaningless. Look at the Dragon Festival we had very recently that rewarded all of these awesome XP boosters that gave you XP for all these different things. Just nobody cared about them. People have made thousands of gold of profit off of these items simply because now that we care about experience, there's a whole load of new items in the game that we actually look at. Your Ascended Amulets, should you get a utility infused Ascended Amulet, you've always been able to choose. Do you want Magic Find? Do you want Karma? Do you want XP or Gold, right? Basically, nobody has ever cared about that experience one. That was the worst one, and I've spent more time wearing that utility bound infusion than I have any other in the past year or so. So this is really good. There are more mechanics that we're excited about. There are more things that we're looking at, and I think I've been enjoying that a lot about the mastery system. Of course, one thing that we still can't value too much is how long these masteries are taking to get. I know I've been playing a lot, and I don't have that many of them completed as it stands. Obviously, if you do dedicated farms for it, like the COF farm, then basically a lot of mechanics have been stripped away for you. But I do think in general they've taken long enough. If I consider myself someone who plays a lot, then people who play much more casually definitely have a long time of experiencing this value in experience. And hopefully by the time they get towards the end, ArenaNet start putting more masteries in the game. But time will tell. The other thing as well that I was particularly looking forward to with Heart of Thorns and talked a lot about before release, that I've been curious whether it would really pay off, is the mastery levels system, where now you no longer just have a level 80 next to your name everywhere, which was, again, meaningless in Guild Wars 2. Now, when you see people, the number that's next to their nameplate actually represents how good they've done with masteries. And this, again, has been really awesome. I always find myself now, when I meet a random person or someone's wandering around, you know, if they're over a level 100 already, right, or over level 80 even, or basically just over the level I'm at, which is early 60s, if they're above that point, I'm always impressed. You know, the COF farm kind of removed that for a little while, but I am impressed, and I am pretty happy seeing these people with very high mastery point levels. And it's kind of exciting to think that, you know, as time goes on, as more masteries come into the game, that level's just going to slowly bump up. It's kind of putting that value back into levels that you see so much in other MMOs, but we've never had in Guild Wars 2. There is a bit of a fear that that could become toxic on some way, I suppose. You know, kind of like how achievement points can be used in a toxic way already in the game, such as, oh, you can't play Ascalon Catacombs Part 1 with me because it's so difficult, unless you have 10,000 achievement points, right? We do get a little bit of that, and maybe we'll see some discrimination based on mastery points at some point, but I've not seen any of it, and again, this has just made the game good. I'd definitely say that ArenaNet managed to meet their aims there. The next thing I want to talk about is the open world difficulty of the jungle. So again, this is something we heard a lot about. Heart of Thorns was going to be harder. It wasn't just going to be hard because they were adding raids, or because they were changing fractals, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's going to be harder because just general open world stuff would be more difficult. How has that ended up paying off? I would say absolutely. I do feel a lot more incentive to try different builds than I never have before. I've been mixing in, you know, actual supporty stuff with my character, even when they're on very glassy sets, just so that they can survive and I can get that level of comfort back. I think the general roaming around of the jungle is more enjoyable for me. It does come as that double-edged sword, though, that at the same time you also kind of feel like you can't just take a second to stop anywhere in these maps, really, unless you're next to a waypoint. You can't take a second to stop and look at your map and just mess about or go AFK. You're pretty much always going to return, and some dinosaur or some Mordrum or some Chuck has ran over from nowhere, or even a freaking mushroom, and has ended up blowing you up. So that's a bit of a downside, but I definitely do think the open world difficulty has been improved. There's one thing specifically that not too many people were looking at, but I did, you know, talk about a little before the game came out, specifically based on one of the betas, and this was a hope that I had that the dynamic events they were making were also going to be more involved. And your generic dynamic events were going to have more difficult mechanics, be more engaging, and as such, this would be a way of them giving better difficulty and more engaging gameplay, even outside of just enemies, you know, that can now stealth and will dodge and will move away from you and have all these other wonderful things to do. And with this, I'd say mostly they've hit the bar, but sometimes really haven't. Sometimes I'm still getting that experience in the regular game that I had, where you're just running around basically not paying any attention and still completing events. But maybe those kind of events are okay. But back during the betas, I was basically looking at stuff like Jaka Itsu. And I was looking at putting out fires, and, you know, now they had AoEs that expanded, and when you threw a bucket of water on a fire, it wouldn't just disappear, it would shrink down a bit. And I looked at ideas that they had with the stealth gliding, and the idea that as we moved around the jungle, there would be actual wyverns that we could pull down from the sky. Who remembers those comments? And specifically for me, I remember there was an event in one of the betas, which ArenaNet has now obviously decided was massively overtuned and is nerfed to oblivion. But I remember one of these events from the betas where you have a Mordrum Breacher and you have a bunch of Vine Tenders there, which all have to be killed in unison. You have to kill all three of them. They were all like champs and very tanky. You had to kill them all in unison, and then when they all died in unison, you could finally nuke out the Breacher. And if you didn't do that, basically if you were a player that was just mindlessly zerking, you'd kill one early, and the event would stall for God knows how long. And I praised in a video, I praised ArenaNet for an event like this, because I said, you know, it's risky to design this kind of stuff, because when you design stuff that is as involved as this, you essentially open up certain events for trolling. You open up these events for, you know, that one guy can be like, oh, I'm just going to keep DPS and I'm never going to have map chat on, I'm never going to have local chat on, I'm going to appear offline, and I'm just going to face roll for, you know, ages and ages and ages and ages and ages, and, you know, frustrate the 20 other people who are stood here. And I actually applauded ArenaNet, because in the beta, I wasn't experiencing those moments. I was rather experiencing the positive side of things, that we just had, like, better events, and we had to synchronize burns, and we had to, you know, slam down break bars, and do kind of that more fun stuff, that more engaging stuff for the big open world events. Did that translate after the betas into the general Heart of Thorns experience? No, I think most instances of this have been nerfed by the devs. There's one instance of it still occurring in the Auric Basin at one of the events with the Eastwatch pylons, which I participated in just today. And mostly people just get very ragey, people don't understand. You can look at like the Tyria meta event where you have to kill all 4 of those Octavines at once, but you know, you get a huge window of opportunity. If somebody accidentally burns one to death, you get a huge window of opportunity to maybe be able to save the situation. In general, I really don't get that kind of experience from the events, but that could be a good thing. You know, that trolliness, maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic. There are always going to be people who don't understand and then they get called out as being bad by other people. Maybe we just don't need that. On the other hand, many other events have been lots of fun. In the footage you should have seen on this video, I did a meta event I'd never done before, and oh look, I've been turned into a new Hawk, I have a new skill bar, and you know, there's a lot of engaging different things that we're doing. The general bar is much higher, even if sometimes there are these events where you're just kind of autoing and killing champion and then killing another champion, and then, oh, guess what, killing another champion. At least we have more break bars to pay attention to, which definitely have changed things. Speaking of map metas, another thing that I do want to broach was I was looking forward to all of the map metas. I do think that they've generally satisfied me here, and they've done some subtle things as well that I do want to bring to your guys' attention with the design. So in the jungle now, you should know, if you mouse over your minimap, they have some new UI in place which will show you your actual participation for a meta event. So a meta event is composed of lots of small events, and the more of those small events you complete, the higher you push your participation, and it's only when you push that participation quite high you get better rewarded. This is a really cool system, and I very much saw this come into effect today in Verdant Brink. Previously in the video, I talked to you guys about how Verdant Brink works and the security level at night. And I told you I got to the very end of tier 3, but never quite pushed it to the final tier, the security level 4, which is technically tier 5. Never managed to do it. Today, playing on EU with a big community meetup on the stream, we did this, and we actually did manage to get it to the final security level. The reward incentive is actually very well designed. See, in Verdant Brink, you have an associated set of armor with unique skins. This is the bladed armor. It's quite a nice looking armor set. A lot of people have been wanting to go for it. Now, you can get all the bladed armor easily enough, except the chest piece, which you can only get from participating in these nighttime events. So because we got security level 4, which is fairly rare to see, a lot of people, when the meta event ended, were actually rewarded with the chest piece, and it was a really fun, big, rewarding moment for a lot of us. But what ArenaNet have done is something quite smart here. When you get security level 4, you only have a chance to get the bladed armor. This, of course, encourages people to play it consistently and adds a bit of that RNG that we saw, say, with the Carapace armor and the Luminescent armor back in the Silver Wastes. But what they've done smart here is the higher your participation, so mine was 200% because I'd been there from the start, I'd done a bunch of the events, and I'd actually progressed the map from the beginning. If your participation for the meta is very high, you have a much higher chance of getting the chest piece, to maybe almost a guaranteed chance of getting the chest piece. While if you only ferried onto the map towards the very end, that's when it becomes much higher RNG for you. This is really smart, because if you look back at the way they designed the Silver Waste is a great map, but it kind of encouraged some weird gameplay where people would just go to LFG, look for maps that were already pushed really far, basically off of someone else's efforts, and then they'd ferry in at the last second. So all they did was fight the final boss, and then they'd go for their RNG chance at whatever drop they were going for. Well, instead now, they've got a system that's going to encourage people to not just ferry on at the end, but work their whole way through. Because if you do the Silver Waste technique now, you're basically not going to get the armor anyway. You don't have very much meta contribution. This general idea, the user interface that they put in the game, this stuff has made the metas for these maps far better. And, you know, I'm hoping with the extra Living World maps that they continue to add into the game as well. We're pretty much on easy street here, and I think they've got the room to just design some cool events. And the way that they have done rewards is pretty much bang on for me now. Next topic, right before release, we of course heard on a stream about this wonderful new thing, combat mode. I talked a little bit on like the first day or two about my experience of using combat mode. It's been long enough now. I think in general, combat mode is okay. Honestly, it doesn't change things too much. It does make you feel a bit faster. It can improve your game in some ways, but then also make it harder to do certain other tricks like using, you know, burning retreat forwards or lightning reflexes forwards or withdraw forwards or stuff like that. It can make certain things a little bit more difficult. I do think with a lot of careful key binding, so like snap ground target to enemy, alright? This is really good while using combat mode, but there are a lot of situations where you don't want snap ground target on, and in these situations, you're going to have to bind another key so that you can manually move it even while that option's bound on. I think for your average player, basically, this is not going to be something most people bother with. Like, it looks fun, it feels fun, but you're going to find these weird moments of clunkiness that it takes very specific bindings and setup and practice to get over. I think those hurdles that just have to be there, basically. I think, I don't fault ArenaNet for this. I think that the design behind the combat mode, they've pushed it as far as they can. They've given us as much quality of life as they can. They've done what they can to try and retrofit the system into a game which basically wasn't originally designed for it. And I think if you play perfectly, if you really do want to go extreme with it, combat mode can be great for you. I think for your average player, though, we're not really going to worry too much. Probably just see people use it every now and then, but not en masse or anything like that. I don't think it's fair to say that all of Guild Wars 2's combat's changed. And actually, you know, when they first revealed combat mode, I said, wow, I can't believe ArenaNet have left it this late to talk about combat mode. This is a hugely marketable feature. This is amazing. You know, this is a lot of people who just fundamentally didn't like the combat of Guild Wars 2 might be interested in Heart of Thorns now. That's huge. But you know, I would have thought back then that they should have marketed it harder. But actually, now that I've played it enough, I think they did just the right thing. It was some like bonus thing that we heard about right towards the end, and leaving it there was probably the best thing they could have done. Let's talk about Fractals. Now, Fractals, for clarification, I have not played. However, I have participated in a hell of a lot of discussion about Fractals. So I do want to talk about how Fractals have been implemented. It would seem, all right, so big asterisk on what I'm about to say here, based on what ArenaNet wanted for them and what they've ended up. Now, I think with Fractals, they have pretty much dropped the ball. So what did we hear about before launch? We heard that Fractals they wanted to make them easier to get into, but harder to master. You know, that's basically the dream situation you want, okay? So those of us who play much more casually, we can just nip in for a Fractal every now and then. It's something fun we can do. It was the main place they said that they wanted instanced 5-man content to be, and people would feel happy enough to just go for an odd one, but eventually they could get hooked into it and get better and better and better until they go into some really challenging stuff at the higher scales. Great idea. I don't fault them for their ideas, but their implementation seems to be really shoddy. Don't forget as well that just before launch, they revealed to us that dungeons were losing some of their liquid gold. So dungeons have been disincentivized. Specifically, it was confirmed to make sure more people would be trying Fractals instead. At that time, one of my biggest worries was that we wouldn't have enough varied content in Fractals because they haven't added many new Fractal islands for a long time. And, you know, if people are really being heavily incentivized to just go there, then they're going to need more stuff to keep them interested. So what has the result been? Over on the dungeon side of thing, I do think the outcry against the dungeon gold nerf was overstated. I have been checking LFG. I did it on the stream just today. And to look, you know, not even at prime time, you know, early in the morning for most people, there were plenty of LFGs across every single dungeon except COE. People are still running dungeons and will continue to run dungeons, I believe, far off into the future. There are dedicated rewards associated with them, and there's still a lot of money even if some of the liquid gold's been removed. But for Fractals, what happened to the shifting of rewards from dungeons into Fractals? That's what they said they were doing, right? They were going to take some of it away from dungeons to put it in Fractals. And it's not there. That hasn't happened. In fact, the rewards are far worse in Fractals, it would seem, than they were before Heart of Thorns. At least before Heart of Thorns, I would run, you know, my Fractal 50 or Fractal 40 every now and then because it was a really good way of getting Ascended gear. Ascended gear that we could now stat swap. The rates on that Ascended gear have been obliterated now. Preliminary reports from some of the biggest Fractals running guilds out there, King specifically I'm talking about right now, are showing that there's so low rates on the actual rewards. It seems that there's an oversight with Fractal weapon boxes as well, or at least one that you get account bound when you complete a collection, which means people can sell them on the trading post, so you don't even have to play Fractals at the moment to get like the golden Fractal weapons or the regular Fractal weapons. So that big, you know, tie to Fractals now has also been removed. And in general, the content itself too doesn't seem to have been tested so well. Damage on enemies doesn't scale in a particularly fascinating regard, which means it doesn't feel particularly more risky being at like scale 90 compared to the old scale 50. Basically, the difference now is things are very tanky. As far as I can tell, yes, there are break bars now, which do change the gameplay a little bit, and breaking the break bars can allow you to burn and do more damage, but not enough. And yes, toughness has been scaled, so in theory, could you run a lot of condition damage? Running condition damage on your comp should help you to burn through stuff faster, but still not enough. It sounds to me like people are basically falling asleep. It's becoming a huge grind to do fractals, and at the higher scales, they're just not balanced correctly. Again, this is all he said, she said coming from me, but I do like to think I'm tapped fairly well enough into the community to think that there's some reasonable discussion about this right now, and that's a shame. To put a cherry on top of it all, what's exciting about getting 50 new fractal scales? Not just, you know, random arbitrary scaling of enemy stats, but more instabilities, right? Some of the instabilities have been a huge hit and people have really been enjoying, but a great deal as well are just kind of reused or encouraging sort of boring gameplay. And that sucks. You know, to look once again at what ArenaNet were originally trying to do. If they were looking at fractals as their 5-man super challenging content, while raids are their 10-man, you know, like, these two things are on par almost, right? It's just the amount of players you got, then that has definitely not been hit at all, and I don't think people are really getting any super amazing experiences, but maybe you guys can talk about that in the comments below. A couple of other things before we close the video. I do want to talk a little bit about guilds. So, of course, a lot of changes happen with guilds. How has that impacted me as a player? I've really not been involved very much in guild progression. It's kind of cool seeing the pop-up appear in the middle of my screen when my guild level's up. The guild level system seems really fun. Decorations certainly have been a hit. We haven't seen a massive amount of community creations or you know, guild-based jumping puzzles and things like that, but a few decent videos have already started to arise, and I think this will be a huge part of the game going forward. It's just people are still unlocking stuff, and that's understandable. But one big feature you guys probably aren't taking advantage of that has changed my game quite a lot is Guild Alliance chat. Remember that you can listen to guild communication for the guilds you're even not representing right now. It's just not going to be enabled by default. So if you guys are listening to me, this will improve the game a lot for you and maybe make you assess some of these dead guilds you're using, or if you're really only in one guild. Don't forget to set up a chat channel down in the bottom left-hand corner of your client so that you can see other guilds, because as soon as I realized I could do that earlier today, it's been a lot of fun, and I think that actually has been as good as I was hoping it. Again, Colin even came out with a comment saying, you know, this is actually one of the things I'm most excited about, and to be honest, it has been very cool. A couple of things about the economy. This Arena never really made any statements about it, but a lot of people will have been speculating about the economy. You know, I had multiple people telling me, oh, you should invest in tier 6 materials, because when the expansion comes out, people will be able to do their precursor crafting, and the precursor crafting is probably going to cost a lot of materials, and then they're going to go for legendaries they didn't before, so that means loads of gifts of fortune, so loads of T6. On the other hand, when the expansion came out, we were getting a bunch more level 80 maps, and people flooding into those level 80 maps. We were getting a lot more rewards through the map bonus reward system. So what was going to happen to stuff like rares? What was going to happen to tier 6 materials? Specifically as well, right around the release, it was revealed Damask had some shifting around of how to craft it, which made it look like it was going to be even more expensive. Was this going to blow? In fact, there was a huge, you know, speculative backlash that Damask was suddenly become really expensive. Here's the results. Rares are way cheaper. This actually makes it feel kind of crappy when you get rares in game now, because oh, it's not even worth that much anymore. A lot of exotics are a lot cheaper. T6 is way cheaper. The only one that's really somewhere around where it used to be is Blood. As for Damask, that didn't change at all. As far as I can see from Guild Wars 2 Spidey, it's basically remained stable, even though the recipe is kind of different now. Finally, bugs. Bugs and a final assessment on some stuff I talked about right when Heart of Thorns released, and how to release an expansion smoothly. So earlier in the week, I was thrilled. I was very happy about how comfortably ArenaNet released Heart of Thorns. They told it was coming out at a certain date, at a certain time on a certain date rather. They gave us the ability to preload just like half an hour before. Downloads were really quick. I was patched in just a matter of minutes. Got in game, there were no queue issues, there was no downtime, there was no lag. Just got to play smooth as butter. Then, of course, there were actual in-game issues. Stuff like event stalling or, you know, exploits. Basically just things breaking. The next period of maybe 72 hours or so, I would say, was filled with tons of really stupidly fast, frequent patching, which meant we had to, you know, relog every now and then, but honestly wasn't too big of a deal. And things were generally doing very well. Now, towards the end of the week, I've got to admit I'm getting a bit frustrated. I've been getting frustrated with issues in the personal story that continuously have been kicking me out after cutscenes. I've been getting seriously frustrated while streaming or doing any kind of large group-based content, or even small stuff, to be honest, in any of the new maps or old maps. With some kind of memory error that seems to be hitting Guild Wars 2 right now, and everybody is consistently crashing out, still hasn't been resolved, and it is kind of getting on my back a little bit to continuously think, right, I'm going to go do this outpost, right, I'm going to go do the Scar outpost in Tangled Depths, I really want to get these achievements, and every single time the same event stalls, the same event stalls, the same event stalls. There are maybe, out of all of Heart of Thorns, 5 or 6 events out there that are continuously stalling and haven't had fixes. That original 72-hour period of lots of patches seems to have died away a little, but I guess, you know, being in permanent crunch for that long, you can't expect it for forever. I am still hoping that these fixes will come through. So my opinion is that it's been a little bit more rocky than it was when the week originally started, but I can't fault it too much. If something stalls, I can just go off and do something else. And generally, my impressions have been pretty good. So there you go, guys. That's a look at some of the things we were thinking about before launch and how they actually ended up translating into the release. Basically, another bit of a week in review video for you guys here today. Let me know what you think. Have what I said here been drastically different to some of your own experiences? I've been really loving the comment section these past few videos. To be honest, guys, really enjoying. I've read every single one. Been participating in a lot of discussions. It's been very cool. So do get down there. Go at it. And I guess I'll see you next time. Have a good day, everyone.